not just for Chassidus, but understanding the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. And that is the difference between creation of man and creation of all other creatures. And briefly, the Rebbe said the creation of all creatures was the Neshama together with a guf. They came out together. They came out as a full form. And by the way, this is one of the arguments when the certain scientists have argued the world is millions of years old. And the proof is that you take a look at something that has these fossils and these rings and all that. So one of the counter arguments that Rebbe brings this as well is that to begin with it was created that way. So yes, it does appear to have been millions of years old, but because the nefesh and the ruach, this is based on what we're learning yesterday and learning today, it answers this question. Because the nefesh and the nefesh and the guf, the soul and the body of all creatures were created together in full form. Therefore, if they weren't that way, it would have taken millions of years. But it was that way, so Hashem to begin with made it that way. Conversely, man, Adam, was created a goylem, a piece of mud, as Yonason so nicely corrected us yesterday. So a goylem is a piece of mud, a daiming, that's called daiming, silent, right? Silent but deadly, right? Silent. And the Eibishter then, Vayipach bi'apav nishmas chayim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu blew within this piece of mud a living soul, nishmas chayim. So the Rebbe's question, the Rashab's question at the end was, why did Hashem make this difference? Lama Shina, the word Shina, why did he make this change? So the entire paragraph that we learned yesterday was an elaborate explanation explaining the difference. And the question is where we're at. Now let's learn the Kitzer, page 219. Please turn off your, mute yourself, whoever's not. I think Yaakov, please mute yourself. Kol Nivroyim, Tzva Shamayim, Tzva Oretz, Kitzer. 219. All hosts, all creations, heavenly and earthly, Bali, Guf, and Nefesh, Hema, they both have what we call a body and a soul. Tzva Shamayim Shetzirasa Miyaseidus Hadakim, the heavenly hosts, the formation of their existence are of the elements, the more refined elements called fire and air. Tivom, the nature then being, Bahagbaras Hatsura ala Chomer, the overpowering over form over matter. Conversely, Utzva Haaretz, the earthly hosts, Sheyitzirosam Gam Miyisoides Hagasim, which also includes their formation, consists of not only the two more refined elements of fire and air, but also dust, water and dust, Teva Toldusam, the nature of the way they were created, it is that matter takes control and overpowers form. The Rebbe then said, Guf v'nefesh, we have a very, in Kabbalah, a mushal that's used constantly for soul and body, that is or v'keli. Actually, or refers to the nefesh, the soul, and keli refers to the guf, the body. Masimim. The Rashab said an interesting point. They match each other. It's a proper donor's match. Okay? The blood type is the same. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shina Oifen Yetziras Haguf Adam. Who is the one who makes a difference in the way man's guf is created in comparison to all other creations? It's Hashem. And remember, Moshe, what we learned yesterday is that's the meaning, and it's very important when we say in the morning Asher Yotzar each time. But Mafli Lasos. That word mafli, you have to add. Why do we say mafli? Mafli means it's wondrous. It's in Yiddish. The word is avunderbar. It comes from the German wunderbar. Right? What's the wunderbar over here? What's the wonder? The answer is because Hashem, you've made a U-turn on us or a left turn. Shina. You created every creature in a certain way Why didn't you create man that way? No. Man I'm going to create differently. So this difference is startling. And this is what we're going to explore now in the next paragraph, Perek Beis, page 219 in Kuntres U'Maayan. והנה טעם בסיבס הדבר מה שהקדוש ברוך הוא שינה איפה יצירס גוף האדם איפה יצירס גוף של בעלי חיים. The reason why Hashem made a difference, the whole בעלי חיים became awesome nivru uvetziyav nivru. All animals were created in their posture and their image. The Adam nivra versus man, who was created afar min ha'adama, earth, dust from the earth. The tchila nivra gufay, first man's body was created, and only afterwards v'achar kein nitna by nishmasayim was his soul inserted within the mud, the goylam, in the guf. Says the Rebbe, Eina legreyasa. This is not a negative aspect, a point. Ela adarab, on the contrary, hilim malyusa, Hashem did it as a virtue. Malyusa is from the word ma'ala, benefit. This fact that man was created from earth of the dust of the earth, it denotes, it demonstrates how great the neshama that Hashem gives man is. And let's see what he says. To understand this, the four divisions which divide, call, next page, 221. Hanivrayim, which divide all creatures. Vehem, here are the four divisions. Doimim, the world of the inanimate. Tzemeyach, the world of vegetation. Chai, the domain of the living. And finally, Umedaber, the domain of the speaking, which is the human being. Hine, hachelik hayoser ruah, the shuffle, hu chelik hadoimim, the lowest, and is the what? Is the inanimate. V'chelik hayoser naila, and the one that's above that, umeshubach hu chelik, and the one that's the highest and greatest, and the most praiseworthy, Meshubach, who chelik hamedaber, is the living kingdom. And since man is of the highest category, ubchir hanivroim, and the choicest of creations, hine oifen yitziras gufay. Therefore, the way man's body was created, it is different with a change than the way all other animals are created. The gam gufa etzem achayim Hashem imenu bara kodesh baruch hu es gufa adam ofem min adama, and the very essence of mud, of material that Hashem created man's body, dust from the earth, hagas from the coarse earth. Right? It's dust of the earth. You can't get any lower than that. It denotes how great soul of man is, the ultimate of exaltation. Why is this? Based on the famous rule. Here is the rule, Chavre. The chol hagavoya gavoya b'yoser. Whoever is higher, yored lemata mata b'yoser, they fall lower. Ukamei begashmis. On the royim we see, because lavonim, when you take a wall that has stones, bricks. When the lower bricks of the wall fall and dismantle, they end up being close to the wall. However, when the bricks on the top of the wall fall, they fall very distant from the wall. And each brick the higher it is, it falls further away. So what's the rule? The higher you are, the further you fall. So that's the way it's begashmis. Now the Rashab says, v'chein beruchnius. So it's also beruchnius. In regard to the souls and souls. You see, it says neshamois v'nefashos. One is neshama and one is nefesh. Nefesh is that aspect of the soul that's the animating one that makes the person, bottom line, live and breathe. The liyos, the nishmas ha'odam higavoy, since man's soul is so much higher than any other soul of any other creation, lochein hininosum la'kodesh baruch hu guf mechayimarav v'gas b'yoser. Specifically because we have such a high neshama yoni, Hashem gave us the most coarse goof. Lefi shebekoiche levare ulezache chazachayimar yoser of agas b'yoser, because the neshama has the ability to refine the most coarse thing. So, in other words, we might think that, wait a minute, if we are from the domain of the living, which is the highest of the four domains, we should have the most refined body, and we find that we have the most coarse body, right? And why is that? So the answer that Rashab says is because we have the highest soul, and the purpose of the soul is to refine the coarsest of the coarse, i.e. the body. So Hashem specifically gave us, and not angels, and not celestial beings, etc., a coarse body, but us He gave a coarse body because we are able to refine it, and they aren't, because they don't have such a high neshama. Therefore, it says the Rashab, we find by man in practical life, there are those that have very bad midos, God forbid, much worse than undomesticated animals that tear and destroy. And they use their koyach to destroy and hurt people. And he says in Yiddish, machen eng, to make narrow, tight, uncomfortable, und schlecht and bad, dem zweiten, the other person. They use their God-given talents of being a human being with a neshama to hurt and destroy others. The goyzlim, and they rob, they steal, they rob and they murder. In order to fulfill their indulgences. The Rashab says by most of those people who do this, it's because their guf, their body, is inclined towards bad. And these bad inclinations of the guf, it makes a bad impact on their soul. Very interesting to what he says here. In other words, he's saying, and this is what I've been telling you for years, and just spoke about a Motzei Shabbos in Tom's River, where a gentleman spoke about the Rishoyim, how he got a Russia to do tshuva. And I said to him, that's wonderful, but why do you have to call them Rishoyim? In Chabad, we don't know what that word means. It's not in our lexicon. Well, he says, what do you mean? It's a Mishnah. I said, I know the Mishnah too. I didn't want to tell him I know the Mishnah better than he knows the Mishnah. I know the Mishnah too. But the attitude, when you learn Chassidus and you learn Tanya, is you look at yourself. If anyone's a Russia, you look at yourself. First, you look at yourself, and at other people, you look with the right eye, and yourself, you look with the left eye. And even yourself, you shouldn't have self-deprecation, etc. The Nakuda being that the Rashab says here, that if anything is wrong, including murder, stealing, robbing, hurting, cheating, and many of those things that we discussed in the last 2 weeks in our classes, Moshe, right? Says, what does the Rebbe say here? That's from the Guf's perspective. The Guf is the cause. The neshama, the same neshama that's in this goof that's acting so bad is not the cause of those bad traits. Now you say, of course it's not. It's not of course. Since the goof, the nefesh, unites with the goof, you would think it's like, lahavdil. Remember Patty Hearst from the symphonies, remember in the 1970s, for those that were alive and know about it? She was Hearst, the famous newspaper journalist, founder, daughter, and she was caught by this cult and group and, enemy, and they brainwashed her, and she became an agent for them. So what's the nakuda? The neshama, you would think, once it unites with the goof, it identifies and adapts the culture of the goof. So if the goof is a cheat and a stealer and a murderer and everything else, the neshama is also that way. Says the Rashab, no. And Adarabah, what is he saying here? What are we learning this morning? What we're learning is that the goof is really so much higher. And the soul of a man, of a human, is so much higher. And that's why he's put into a low goof, into a goof which is, a piece of the mud, like Yonason said, and over there make the difference. And that includes being a cheat and being a murderer, and let me see how you can change the situation. So it's so contrary to the way we normally think about the relationship between the soul and the body, good and bad. Another example. Arba Bonim, there are 4 sons that are asking questions Pesach night. Chacham, Rasha, Tom, She'ena Deyalishul. Let me ask you a question, Yaini. Why is the Rasha next to the Chacham? Wouldn't you think the Rasha should be number 4, sitting far away? He's a Rasha.
I've been asking that for 40 years. 40 years I've been asking that question.
So you're going to get the answer now. You're going to get the answer. It's not my answer. It's an answer everyone knows. And this is the answer. The answer is that the Rasha has a good spark in him, and the Rasha is more animated, but is a troublemaker. And therefore, who has the responsibility of changing this Rasha? The Chacham. So we have him right next to him. The Tom is sincere, is like a goylem, doesn't know any different, right? She'eni Yadei Elishul doesn't even know what's going on, right? So those two are kind of out to left field, right? And they're not troublemakers. Troublemakers are right next to the Chacham. And I told you what Reb Shoel Brook, he was a mechanach, a chassid. He used to say, he had a yeshiva first in Tel Aviv and then in Rishon LeZion. I'm talking about 1950s, early 60s. So he would say, I'd rather have a wild beast, animal, kid than a tame goody-goody. Because those kids that are wild, if you work on them, they're going to be leaders one day. And I know, and you probably know from people who in their youth were very wild, but when their seichel kicked in, one of them in particular, I know that was very wild in yeshiva. He did some very wild things. And he had yechidus with the Rebbe when he was 18 to 20 or so, 20 I think. And the Rebbe told him, and he had an excellent head, the Rebbe said, what I want of you is to be a Rav like a Rav was in Europe. And from that day on, he didn't stop learning. And he was my Rebbe. And I saw the way he learned till 11 at night every Friday before he went to make Kiddush. And he came into 770 with 2 bags full of svarim. I saw this, because no one else was there. I came early, an hour before Shabbos, and my Rebbe walks in, and he was tall and handsome and big, and he put down the 2 talezim sacks full of svarim from, let's say on a Shabbos like this, 4:30 in the afternoon till 11 at night. And then his son told me, who was younger but is still a friend, that he would sit on a recliner and wouldn't go into bed all Friday night. He would, of course, doze off sometimes, but otherwise he would be learning. And he, as a teenager, you wouldn't want to be next to him because he'd get into a lot of trouble, because he was all full of trouble. So the Chacham is placed right next to the Rasha. That's the answer. So when you have a son or a daughter or a grandson or a granddaughter or a friend and all that. And the troublemakers embrace them. Embrace them. Because they have the potential to be gewaldig. Really gewaldig. Outstanding. And this is what the Rashab is saying here in different words. That this neshama of ours is not the cause of the problems. The cause is the guf. And the neshama is there to transform the guf. And the same is true with, I probably told you this years ago, when I was 17 or so, when we went on the Miftzoyim on Manhattan, Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue, everyone knows Fifth Avenue, 42nd Street, 45th Street. Thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people are walking. And I'm standing there asking who would like to put on tefillin. One response is, I'm too busy, I have to go to lunch, I have to go to work, and they just go further. Other response is, it's nonsense, it's outdated, don't waste your time, don't waste my time. Which of the two is closer to the tefillin? The one who fights you, or the one who just laughs at you and walks on? The one who fights you. Because the one who fights you, there's something inside that's bothering him. And the other story that I told you, in the valley in California, Rabbi Yeshua Gordon of blessed memory, who everyone knows about and learns with him Chitas. So it's in the early days in the 70s. He's a shliach of the Rebbe, and he's invited to lead a chabura, 20, 30 people, men and women, adults, intelligent, not religious yet, are in a room. They're talking about Torah and about Hashem and Josh Gordon is the rabbi. That's and there's one guy sitting on the floor in sweatpants. And the rabbi says yes. He says no. The rabbi says A. He says B. He says white. He says dark. Everything he's arguing with the rabbi, and he's very bright. And the rabbi's thinking, get out of here. Leave. You're ruining the situation. I have all these captivated people who want to learn about Hashem and about Torah, and we can, bring them into the fold and get them started, and you're ruining it. And I knew this person, and he became more frum than everyone else, more of a chassid a few years later, because he had some anger inside or whatever the issue, and he was just giving it out. He couldn't control himself. So you have to allow people to let their issues go out. That's the guf. The neshama knows how to transform that. But the neshama has to realize that that's its job. Let's go back to the text, please. Let's go back to the text.
One question before you go.
Yes. Yes.
Since you brought up the Haggadah example, I thought about this when we were learning Tanya, that it seems like the way that Tanya describes a Russia is somebody who's doing right at a given moment. I guess the majority of Rishayim are what we call it Rasha Batovlo, right? So given that, how would you understand the Haggadah labeling somebody a Russia in that way?
Well,
especially given all the Hasidus you're saying about the Russia.
Because
what's he doing wrong?
But the answer is that. What do you mean? Right now he's doing an avera. Right now he's the act, the practice, the behavior is Russia. Not that he's a Russia. His behavior is a Russia. So in Chazal we classify someone whose behavior is a Russia as a Russia. And
so at some point you're looking at him and he's doing something raw, and that's how you're responding to him.
That's right. At
your Seder. Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
I can go with it.
Yeah. Okay. Back to the text.
I want to apologize. I got to run, but
okay.
I'll see everybody.
Yeah.
I got to go in tomorrow.
אבל הנפש מצד עצמו. Yes.
Rabbi Delphin, I'm sorry. I have a question.
Sure.
Sorry.
Sure. You don't have to be sorry. That's what would, yeah.
We know we've been speaking obviously about we have the goof, and then we've been speaking about the nefesh Bahamas, the nefesh sichlis, the nefesh alokis, and I guess I've always been puzzled by what were this difference between what I just said and now this whole terminology of the goof and the neshama. In other words, I've been operating under the assumption, under the understanding, you have the goof, which is klipas noga, could be good, could be used for good, or not. You have the nefesh Bahamas, which is driving the goof, animating the goof with its, 7-layer cake, right? Or ice cream, right?
Or good rib steaks.
Exactly. And then you have the nefesh elokis, which is coming in and saying, let's channel everything, for good, etc. So I guess what I'm asking, here's my question. My question is, given what I just said and what we've been these series of terminology, how do we make sense of that? And now this whole concept, just the goof and the neshama.
Okay, good question.
And on top of that, one last thing. The concept of this particular person's goof could be drawn towards something, and this person's goof could be drawn towards something.
So what's your question about that?
The last meaning, I thought the goof was part of klipas noga.
It is.
And it's the person's nefesh Bahamas which is driving him towards this. Or this one's nefesh Bahamas is driving him towards this.
Okay. I understand. So the short answer to your question is, when we're talking about the goof, we mean nefesh Bahamas. We're talking about the neshama, we mean nefesh elokis. In this, I'm glad you brought it up. In this discussion, this is an example. In Chassidus, and I've said this, and it's important to say it again, everything is relative. You can ask, but the answer is you can't compare the two because it's a different it's a different set of laws. The discussion here is neshama versus guf. You're talking about a discussion where we have nefesh elokis, nefesh Bahamas, and guf. That's not the discussion here. So, if you want to look at your scenario based on what we're learning here, the guf would equal nefesh Bahamas in your question. In other words, the animation of the guf is oriented towards Bahamiskite. So he's not discerning between the animation and the guf. He's discerning between the spirituality, i.e. the neshama, which you would call the nefesh elokis, and the guf. You understand? So you're asking a question from a different discussion, that's not the discussion here. And it's not a contradiction. It's not a contradiction. Here we're talking about the psukim and bereshis. We're taking the text in its literal way. Hashem created a guf, and then the Chazal say, Goylam afer min haaretz. This is not Chassidus. This is Torah. Basic Genesis, bereshis. And we're looking at that. And then we have Hashem giving man nishmas chayim. Another verse in the Torah, right? So we're looking at the soul. We're not going into now the differences of what aspect of the soul and what aspect of the guf are operating. We're not discussing that. We're just making a generality. I hope that's clear. And it continues. Aval hanefesh b'tzad atzma hu betachlis hamayla. But the nefesh, from its own perspective, is the epitome of virtue. A man can climb the ladder from level to level through his good work and to reach true spiritual heights. As it's brought in Reishis Chochma be'echad someone who came excuse me, from the depths of the lowest degradation, the level, and he went up to the highest. Next page, 223. The Chazal say, six things were said by men. Man has three things that are similar to angels. Three things are similar to an animal. The man, from the perspective of the nature of his body and its inclination, is like an animal. And when a man does an animal act, he's worse than an animal. Why? The behema ain't like das. An animal doesn't have das, knowledge. A man does have knowledge. And conversely, from man's perspective of his soul, its inclination is like the angels, because one can reach the highest heights of spirituality. When man climbs the ladder of knowledge, he's greater than angels. Why? The angels, they're fixed and limited to one arena, to one place called the world of spirituality. When they wanted the Gemara on Shabbos, when the angel said they wanted Torah, Hashem said to them, "Hey guys, do you guys have a Yetzer Hara? You don't. As a man that's on earth, nevertheless, although man is on earth, he comprehends and he meditates and reflects on greatest thoughts of godliness. And this meditation upon godliness impacts him to have a great desire and yearning to attach himself to godliness. Therefore, man is even higher than angels. Because in this avodah, because what does he do, Yoini? He actually elevates the Gashmias. So again, this is basically a recap of the whole idea that the neshama is specifically higher than angels. So again, the Gemara says man has three things like angels and three things like a behema. So the Rashab is explaining that really that's true, but really in one aspect, man is greater than malachim, because angels are limited to the place and domain. You know, they're in Bet Shemesh, they don't go to Modi'in. They're in Modi'in, they don't go to Tzvas. You know, everyone stays put and everyone says, it's not my territory. It's not my responsibility. Angels of love are only love. Angels of rain are only of rain. Angels of health are health. Ask the angel of health, do me a favor. Would you today send someone parnasa? He says, I'm sorry, I can't. Why can't? You're an angel. Because I'm limited only to giving rain. A neshama is not that way. A neshama? What? Yoni, what?
This is what we talked about with the Rayats. When the Rayats was talking about how malachim, they have a tafkid, and they can only do their tafkid, and that's why we are higher than an angel.
Exactly. Oh, now you guys heard it from a good Hasidic student of Chassidus. You're right. That's what we learned. That's what he says here. Let's continue next paragraph. And because of this, And this is the answer to the $1 million question. That is why man's body was created in a different form than the bodies than of all creatures, including animals. The gufa, and this is why Yonason, specifically man's body, is mehachomer ho'av v'gas beyoser, of the most coarse and corporeal and grub material of that mud that Yonason mentioned yesterday. Because only man with his neshama has the koyach to schlep this grubba goof out of its grubkeit, out of its coarseness, and make of it a gem, a diamond. Because the neshama has and been satiated with an energy and a force to do that, to illuminate the darkness. And not just the ordinary darkness, but the thick darkness. And to transform the darkness of the goof into light. Because this is the ultimate kavanah. So chavre, the ultimate kavanah is to have what we have and have a situation. And sometimes you say, Hashem, why do you give me such an nisayon? Why do you give me such a test? I want to be your servant. I want to do good, and you give me challenges, and are so ingrained in me, whether it's because I was born that way or I was raised that way. But the fact is, here is the answer. The answer is only us, only humans, are given this neshama because we have such a coarse goof, and that is why Hashem, to begin with, didn't give all creatures such a coarse goof as he gave us. And this is an akuda klolis that we have to live with and learn. Whatever challenges we have in life, we must know they were given to us and only to us. I've said it over and over, that famous sikha that you must learn of the Rebbe in 1976, speaking to the Israeli soldiers that were injured. And they came into 770 being called Nechei Yisrael, the invalids of Israel, on wheelchairs. Comes the Lubavitcher Rebbe in a hot, boiling New York day in August and tells them, you shouldn't be called Nechei Yisrael. You have to change and call yourself Mitzuyanei Yisrael, the most excellent of Israel. They're sitting in wheelchairs and the Rebbe is telling them they're excellent. And the Rebbe says, yes, because it says in the Holy Svarim that your neshamas are from the higher, are higher than ordinary people's souls. And that's why you were given this challenge. So if someone, if parents are confronted with having a certain child and et cetera, we don't look at it in a negative way. We look at it, the Abish that gave us a higher shlichus. And only we can do it, not our neighbors and friends. They have their issues. And when we understand this, again, if you learn that sikha and you look at this, the Mara Mekaymis we brings from Rizal and the Sforim, and you start putting it all together, I'm convinced it will help many people in many different ways understand, deficiencies and injuries and all kinds of issues. And then there's no difference. On the contrary, it's higher. It's higher. Now again, to go and look for that, you're not allowed to. That's usher, you're forbidden. But if min hashemayim, Hashem sends you such a shlichus, you must know, like we're learning here, that you have a higher neshama. And it's not, this is not, the Rebbe wasn't saying it, and I'm not saying it, to make someone feel good. This is the Metzias HaDvarim. This is the fact. And the Alter Rebbe, by the way, in chapter 26 in Tanya, when he talks about the curveballs that we get thrown in Bona Chayim Azayna, children, health, and Parnasa, the Alter Rebbe tackles that issue in chapter 26. And what's his answer? You learn Tanya. What's his answer? His answer is that it comes from the Yud Kei. It comes from the apple of God's eye. You understand? Here I'm suffering in parnasa or in health or with children, etc., etc. And now the Rebbe says it comes from the Yud K. Thank you very much. Hold your Yud K. I don't want this Yud K. If you have an opportunity to embrace Yud K, that means that there's going to be a blessing in Yud K. You have to find the blessing. You have to find the blessing. And we see someone who had a challenge and a difficulty and overcame that is much greater, is way above a person who had it easy. So all of this is part of a result of this discussion here. Okay, so what we're learning here is kind of a technical issue, but it opens up an entire important issue in understanding ourselves and our relationship to Hashem and families. Have a good day, everyone. We'll see everyone tomorrow, Mr. Hashem. Bye, gesund. Bye-bye.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Sorry, what? Right now it's cold, yeah.